The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on the family barbecue, but it wasn't the heat that made my blood boil. It was my cousin Marcus, standing there with his beer in hand, and that smug grin I'd grown to hate. "Come on, Riley," he laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're what, 5'4", 120 pounds soaking wet. The military isn't some video game. It's for people who can actually handle real pressure." My dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My mom's conversation with Aunt Linda died mid-sentence. Even my little brother Jake looked uncomfortable, which was saying something. "Marcus," my uncle warned, but Marcus was on a roll. "I'm just being realistic here. Riley's always been the soft one in the family. Remember when she cried because she stepped on that ant when she was 12? And now she thinks she can make it through Army basic training?" The laughter around the table felt like acid in my ears. Not everyone was laughing. My parents looked mortified, and Grandpa Joe was shaking his head. But enough people were chuckling to make my cheeks burn with humiliation. I set down my plate with deliberate care, my hands surprisingly steady. "You know what, Marcus? You're right about one thing. I did cry when I stepped on that ant, because I cared about something smaller and weaker than me." I stood up slowly, meeting his eyes. "But caring doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." "Riley, honey," my mom started, but I held up a hand. "I leave for Fort Moore in 3 weeks," I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. "And when I graduate basic training, when I earn my place in the United States Army, I want you to remember this moment, because the girl you think is too weak, she's about to prove you wrong in ways you can't even imagine." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Sure, Riley. We'll see." But something in his voice had changed. Just a flicker of uncertainty. I walked away from that barbecue with my head high, but inside, my heart was hammering. Because deep down, in the part of me I didn't want to acknowledge, I wondered if he might be right. The bus doors hissed open at 4 a.m, and my first glimpse of Fort Moore, Georgia, was a drill sergeant's face inches from mine. "Move! Move! Move! Get off my bus!" The next few hours were a blur of screaming, running, and the sinking realization that I might have made the biggest mistake of my life. Drill Sergeant Martinez had the kind of presence that made grown men shrink, and I was definitely not a grown man. "Connors!" he bellowed at me during our first formation. "You look like you could blow away in a stiff breeze. Did your mommy pack you extra sandwiches for the trip?" Laughter rippled through the ranks. I kept my eyes straight ahead, just like they'd taught us in the brief orientation. "I asked you a question, Private." "No, Drill Sergeant." "No what?" "No, Drill Sergeant. My mother did not pack me extra sandwiches." "Good, because there ain't no mommy here to hold your hand. You're in my world now." By day 3, I understood what Marcus meant about pressure. The physical training was brutal. Push-ups until your arms gave out, runs that left you gasping, obstacle courses that seemed designed to break you. But it wasn't just the physical part. It was the mental game. "You're holding everyone back, Connors," Drill Sergeant Rodriguez told me after I'd struggled through the rope climb for the 3rd time. "Your battle buddies are getting smoked because you can't keep up." That night, lying in my bunk with every muscle screaming, I heard Private Johnson whispering to the girl next to her, "That little blonde chick is going to get us all recycled. She's weak." The word hit me like a physical blow. Weak, just like Marcus said. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the exhausted breathing of 50 other women around me, and made a decision. I might not be the biggest or the strongest, but I wasn't going home. Not like this. The next morning, I was up before reveille, doing push-ups in the latrine. Week 4 of basic training, and I still felt like I was drowning. But something had started to change, even if I couldn't name it yet. It started during combatives training. Drill Sergeant Martinez had paired me with Private Thompson, who had about 40 pounds and 6 inches on me. "This should be interesting," Thompson muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. "Combat isn't about being the biggest," Sergeant First Class Williams announced to our class. "It's about using what you have effectively. Leverage, technique, and most importantly, heart." When Thompson came at me with overconfidence written all over her face, I remembered something my grandfather had taught me during our old wrestling matches in his backyard. Don't fight their strength. Use it against them. I slipped her takedown attempt, used her momentum, and suddenly Thompson was on her back, staring up at the Georgia sky. The silence lasted about 2 seconds before Williams started clapping. "That, soldiers, is what we call fighting smart. Connors, Demonstrate that again. For the first time since arriving at Fort Moore, I felt something other than terror or exhaustion. I felt capable. But the real test came during our first field training exercise. We'd been marching for 8 hours with full packs, and my feet were raw with blisters. Private Garcia had started limping around mile 12, and by mile 15, she was struggling to keep up. "Leave me," she gasped during a brief water break. "I'm holding everyone back." I looked at her swollen ankle, then at the rest of our squad. We were all exhausted, but we were close to the finish. So close. "No soldier left behind," I said, shouldering her pack along with my own. "Connors, you can't carry both," Johnson started. "Watch me." Those last 3 miles were the longest of my life. My shoulders screamed, my legs shook, and more than once I thought I might collapse. But Garcia kept walking, and our squad stayed together. When we finally reached the finish line, Drill Sergeant Martinez was waiting. "Connors," he said, and for the first time, his voice wasn't a roar. "Good work." That night, Garcia found me cleaning my rifle. "Thank you," she said simply. "We're a team," I replied. "That's what teams do." But I was starting to understand something else. Strength wasn't just about muscles or endurance. It was about not giving up on the people counting on you. Week 7 brought the gas chamber, and I learned that fear has a taste. It tastes like copper pennies and regret. "You will enter the chamber," Drill Sergeant Martinez announced. "You will remove your masks. You will recite your name, rank, and social security number. Then, and only then, will you be permitted to exit." The CS gas hit my lungs like liquid fire. My eyes streamed, my nose ran, and every instinct screamed at me to panic, to claw at the sealed door, to give up. But I'd been practicing something these past weeks. When the pain got overwhelming, when I wanted to quit, I'd picture Marcus's face at that barbecue. I'd hear his laughter, and I'd keep going. "Private Connors, Riley J. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I gasped through the burning. When I stumbled out into the fresh air, lungs heaving, Drill Sergeant Rodriguez was there. "Not bad, Private. Not bad at all." But the real breaking point came that weekend during our field exercise. We were practicing nighttime operations when everything went sideways. I was on point, leading my fire team through a simulated patrol, when I heard Johnson's voice crack over the radio. "Contact left. We've got casualties." In the darkness and confusion of the training exercise, Private Martinez, not the drill sergeant, but a quiet kid from Texas, had twisted his ankle badly in a hidden dip in the terrain. He was down, and our enemy was closing in. "We need to move," whispered Private Chen. "Leave him for the opposing force to find." Something cold settled in my stomach. This was just training, but the lesson was real. Do you leave a soldier behind to save the mission? Do you risk everyone for one person? "Negative," I heard myself say. "We're not leaving anyone." "Connors, that's not tactically sound," Johnson started. "Then we make it tactically sound," I cut her off. "Chen, you and Williams provide cover fire. Johnson, help me get Martinez mobile. We're all going home." It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't by the book, but we got Martinez out. When the exercise ended and the lights came up, our drill sergeants gathered around us. "Interesting choice, Connors," Sergeant First Class Williams said. "Care to explain your reasoning?" "Roger, Sergeant. The mission was patrol and reconnaissance, but our real mission, our always mission, is to take care of each other. A successful mission where you lose soldiers isn't successful." Williams nodded slowly. "And if that decision had gotten your whole team captured, then we'd have been captured together, Sergeant." Later that night, Martinez found me cleaning my weapon. "Hey, Connors." He was still limping slightly. "Thanks. Don't mention it." "No, I mean it. My older brother was Army, Iraq deployment. He always said you can tell everything you need to know about a soldier by what they do when things go bad." He paused. "You did good." As I settled into my sleeping bag that night, I realized something had shifted inside me. I still wasn't the biggest or the strongest soldier in our company, but I was starting to understand that maybe that wasn't the point. Week 10 of basic training brought the leadership reaction course, and I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the meal ready to eat I'd had for breakfast. "Today," announced Drill Sergeant Martinez, "you'll be tested on your ability to lead under pressure. Each of you will take turns commanding a squad through various scenarios. You will be evaluated not just on whether you succeed, but on how you lead. The first few soldiers went through their rotations with varying degrees of success. Some barked orders like they'd seen in movies. Others froze up completely when things went sideways. Then I heard my name called. Connors, you're up. My scenario was a simulated medical evacuation. 2 soldiers were down with simulated injuries. We had limited time, and there were obstacles between us and the extraction point. As I looked at my assigned squad, Johnson, Chen, Williams, and 2 soldiers I barely knew, I felt that familiar flutter of self-doubt. These were people who'd been skeptical of me from day one. "What's the plan, Connors?" Johnson asked, and I could hear the challenge in her voice. I took a breath and surveyed the course. "Johnson, Chen, you're my strongest. I need you to rig a carrying system for the casualties. Williams, you're our medic. Assess injuries and prioritize. Rodriguez and Patel, you're with me on route clearance. You want us to carry both casualties?" Chen questioned. "That's going to slow us way down." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're going to be smart about this." "Williams, what's the condition on casualty 1? Williams checked the scenario card attached to the mannequin. "Simulated broken leg, conscious and alert. He can help carry casualty 2 if we support him properly. We don't carry dead weight. We adapt and support." I turned to the group. "Remember, we're not just moving bodies from point A to point B. We're bringing soldiers home. That changes everything." Something clicked in the team's dynamic. Suddenly, we weren't just going through the motions. We were problem-solving together. When we encountered the first obstacle, a wall too high to easily lift the casualties over, instead of struggling through it, I called for a modification. "Johnson, boost me up. I'll secure a rope system. We'll get the casualties up safely instead of risking further injury." "That's going to take longer," Williams pointed out. "A slow evacuation that keeps everyone safe is better than a fast one that causes more casualties." By the time we reached the extraction point, we were moving as a unit. When I called clear and signaled the successful completion of the exercise, my heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez approached our group. "Time was longer than ideal," he said, and my heart sank. "But 0 additional casualties and solid leadership adaptation. Well done." After we were dismissed, Johnson caught up with me. "Hey, Connors." She paused like she was choosing her words carefully. "I owe you an apology. Back in week 2, I said you were weak. I was wrong." "Thanks," I said, not sure how else to respond. "No, I mean it. You're not weak. You're just different. Good different. The way you think about things, it's not what I expected from leadership, but it works." That night, lying in my bunk, I thought about Marcus again. But for the first time, instead of anger, I felt something else. Gratitude. His words had hurt, but they'd also pushed me to discover something I might never have found otherwise. I wasn't trying to be the toughest soldier anymore. I was trying to be the kind of soldier others could count on. Graduation was 3 days away when Drill Sergeant Martinez made an announcement that sent ice through my veins. "Ladies, you have one final evaluation. The culminating field training exercise. 72 hours in the field. Everything you've learned will be tested. And here's the kicker." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You'll be competing against Alpha Company. Winner takes the honor of carrying the company guidon at graduation." Alpha Company was legendary at Fort Moore. They'd won the competition 3 years running, and their reputation was intimidating as hell. They were bigger, stronger, and had been talking trash about us weak Bravo Company soldiers for weeks. "One more thing," Martinez added. "Each company will select 1 soldier to serve as overall field commander. That person will be responsible for coordinating all squad movements and mission objectives." My stomach dropped. There was no way. "Connors," he called out. "Step forward." The entire company went silent. I felt 50 pairs of eyes on me as I approached. "Congratulations, Private. You're our field commander." The next morning, before dawn, I stood in front of my company. These weren't just my battle buddies anymore. They were my responsibility. "I know what you're thinking," I said, my voice carrying in the quiet morning air. "Why me? I'm not the biggest, not the strongest, not the loudest. But I've been watching all of you for 10 weeks, and I know something Alpha Company doesn't." I paused, making eye contact with as many soldiers as I could. "They think this is about individual strength, but we've learned it's about collective strength. They're going to try to overpower us. We're going to outsmart them. The first challenge was a 12-mile ruck march with full gear. Alpha Company took off like they were sprinting to the finish line. I held our pace steady. "They're pulling ahead," Johnson observed. "Let them," I replied. "It's not a sprint." By mile 8, Alpha Company was starting to string out. Their fastest soldiers were way ahead, their slower ones falling behind. We maintained our formation, our pace, and our unit integrity. When we reached the navigation course, Alpha Company's lead soldiers were already working on the challenge, but they were working alone. Their commander had let his fastest soldiers race ahead without coordination. "Squad leaders, report," I called on the radio. "First squad ready. Second squad ready. Third squad ready. Fourth squad ready. Good. We're going to move through this systematically. First and second squads take checkpoints 1 through 5. Third and fourth squads 6 through 10. Nobody moves alone, nobody gets left behind." Alpha Company finished faster, but when the instructors checked their work, they'd missed 3 checkpoints and had 2 soldiers unaccounted for. We finished with a perfect score. The final challenge was a simulated combat scenario. Multiple objectives, time pressure, and casualties throughout the course. Alpha Company's approach was predictable. Hit hard, hit fast, overwhelm the opposition. "All squads, this is command," I transmitted. "Alpha Company is going to rush the primary objective. We're going to let them have it." "Say again?" came Chen's voice over the radio. "You heard me. Let them take the primary. While they're focused on that, we're going to systematically clear every secondary objective and rescue every casualty. When the smoke clears, we're going to control the battlefield." It was the longest hour of my life. Over the radio, I could hear Alpha Company celebrating their capture of the primary objective, but I could also hear our squads methodically reporting successful mission completions. Secondary Objective Alpha, secured. Secondary Objective Bravo, secured. 2 casualties recovered. Secondary Objective Charlie, secured. When the exercise ended and the scores were tallied, Alpha Company had taken the primary objective worth 100 points, but we'd secured every secondary objective, recovered every casualty, and maintained unit integrity throughout. Final score: Alpha Company, 100 points. Bravo Company, 340 points. As the instructors announced the results, I heard something I'd never heard before. My entire company was cheering, not just politely, but genuinely, loudly, proudly. But the sound that hit me hardest was Drill Sergeant Martinez's voice over the celebration. "Outstanding leadership, Private Connors. Outstanding." The morning of graduation dawned clear and bright, the kind of Georgia day that makes everything feel possible. But I'd barely slept. Not because I was nervous, I was past that now, but because I couldn't quite believe we'd made it. "Connors," Drill Sergeant Martinez called as we formed up for the ceremony. "You'll be carrying the guidon today." The guidon, our company flag, was more than just fabric and pole. It represented every early morning, every obstacle course, every moment we'd wanted to quit, but didn't, and I was going to carry it. As we marched onto the parade field, I could see the bleachers filled with families. My parents were there, and Jake, and even Grandpa Joe had made the trip from Tennessee. But my eyes kept scanning the crowd until I found him. Marcus. He was sitting with my aunt and uncle, wearing sunglasses and that familiar smirk. He'd come, just like he said he would. To see me fail, probably. "Company, halt!" The graduation ceremony was everything they'd told us it would be. Speeches about honor and sacrifice, the reading of awards, the formal recognition of achievements. But I barely heard any of it. I was focused on the weight of the guidon in my hands, and the knowledge that in a few minutes, I'd officially be a United States soldier. "At this time," announced the reviewing officer, a colonel whose chest was covered in ribbons, "we'll recognize outstanding achievements during this cycle of basic training." My heart started pounding. "The award for outstanding physical performance goes to Private Jennifer Thompson, Alpha Company." Polite applause. "The award for outstanding marksmanship goes to Private Michael Rodriguez, Charlie Company." More applause. "And the award for outstanding leadership." The colonel paused, scanning the formation. "Goes to Private Riley Connors, Bravo Company." The sound that erupted from Bravo Company wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of approval that seemed to shake the very ground. But that wasn't what made my knees weak. It was what happened next. "Private Connors," the colonel continued, "step forward." As I handed off the guidon and marched to the center of the parade field, I could hear individual voices in the cheering. "That's our leader. Bravo, company. Connors." But as I reached the colonel and prepared to receive the award, something unexpected happened. "Connors, Connors, Connors." It started with my company, but it spread. Alpha Company picked it up. Charlie Company joined in. Delta Company added their voices. Soon, over 1,000 soldiers in formation were chanting my name. "Connors! Connors! Connors!" The sound was thunderous, overwhelming, incredible. I stood there at attention, trying to maintain military bearing while my heart hammered against my ribs and tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. But through it all, my eyes found Marcus in the bleachers. He wasn't smirking anymore. He was sitting forward, his mouth slightly open, staring at the spectacle in front of him. 1,000 soldiers, calling the name of his weak little cousin. "Connors! Connors! Connors!" The colonel had to raise his hand for silence, but even then, the energy was electric. "Private Connors," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In my 25 years of military service, I have rarely seen a soldier display the kind of leadership, courage, and dedication you've shown over these past 10 weeks. You embody the values we hope to instill in every soldier who graduates from this installation." He pinned the award to my uniform, then stepped back and saluted me. I returned the salute, trying to process what was happening. "Congratulations, soldier." As I marched back to formation, the chanting started again. "Connors! Connors! Connors!" This time, I allowed myself a small smile. The family barbecue 3 weeks later felt like déjà vu, but everything was different now. I was different now. I sat at the same picnic table where Marcus had called me weak, wearing my dress blue uniform because, honestly, I'd earned the right to show it off. The Army Achievement Medal for Outstanding Leadership was pinned to my chest, but that wasn't what I was most proud of. What I was most proud of was the stack of letters in my pocket, from Johnson, Chen, Williams, and a dozen other soldiers who'd become more than battle buddies. They'd become family. Marcus approached me hesitantly as the afternoon wore on. The cocky swagger was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen from him before. Genuine respect. "Riley," he said, sitting down across from me. "Can we talk?" I nodded. "I owe you an apology. A big one." He stared at his hands. "What I said to you that day, that was wrong. And not just wrong. It was stupid. I had no idea what I was talking about." "Marcus," I started, but he held up a hand. "No, let me finish. I saw the video." "What video?" "Someone posted it on TikTok. Your graduation ceremony. All those soldiers chanting your name." He looked up at me, and I could see something like awe in his eyes. "Riley, there were 1,000 people there, and they all knew your name. They were all cheering for you." I felt a flush of pride, but also something else, something I hadn't expected. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "You were right about one thing. I was weak." Marcus looked confused. "I was weak," I continued. "I was letting other people's opinions define who I could become. I was afraid to push myself because I might fail. I was weak." I paused. But being weak isn't permanent. Being weak is just where you start. The conversation was interrupted by Jake running over. "Riley! Riley! Show Uncle Dave your medal!" As Uncle Dave examined the Army Achievement Medal with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions about what it meant and what I'd done to earn it, I caught Marcus watching me. "You know," he said quietly, "I always thought strength was about being the biggest, the loudest, the toughest. What do you think now?" "Now, I think strength is about becoming who you need to be for the people counting on you." Later that evening, as the party wound down, I found myself standing in the same spot where Marcus had humiliated me months earlier. But this time, I wasn't alone. My parents flanked me. Jake was showing off my military awards to his friends, and Grandpa Joe was telling anyone who'd listen about his granddaughter, the soldier. My phone buzzed with a text from Johnson. "Saw your uniform pics on Instagram. Looking sharp, Sergeant Candidate Connors." That made me laugh. Advanced individual training started in 2 weeks, and after that, if I proved myself again, I'd have the chance to attend the Warrior Leader course. More challenges, more opportunities to grow, more chances to prove that strength isn't about where you start. It's about who you choose to become. Marcus approached me one more time before leaving. "Riley, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That night at graduation, when all those soldiers were chanting your name, what did that feel like?" I thought about it for a moment, remembering the thunderous sound, the overwhelming pride, the knowledge that I'd earned every single voice in that crowd. It felt like coming home, I said, but not to a place, to who I was meant to be. As Marcus drove away, I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I'd been keeping a journal throughout basic training, and I wanted to record this moment. Day 87 post-graduation, I typed. Today I learned that the opposite of weak isn't strong. The opposite of weak is ready, ready for whatever comes next, ready to lead, ready to serve, ready to prove that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of fear. Marcus was right about one thing. I am small, 5'4", 120 pounds soaking wet. But I've learned that taking up space isn't about physical size. It's about the impact you have on the people around you. 1,000 soldiers chanted my name because I helped them discover their own strength. That's not something you can measure in pounds or inches. That's something you measure in lives changed, challenges overcome, and the knowledge that when it mattered most, I didn't back down. I used to think I needed to prove Marcus wrong. Now I know I needed to prove myself right. And I'm just getting started. I closed the phone and looked up at the stars. Tomorrow I'd start preparing for advanced individual training. After that, who knew? Maybe I'd go for Ranger school. Maybe officer candidate school. Maybe I'd spend 20 years in the Army and retire as a sergeant major. But tonight, I was just Private Riley Connors, recent graduate of United States Army basic training, sitting in her parents' backyard and feeling for the first time in her life completely and utterly unafraid of what came next. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't have to be the biggest, or the strongest, or the loudest to make a difference. You just have to be willing to stand up when it matters, to take care of the people counting on you, and to never, ever give up on becoming the person you're meant to be. And when 1,000 soldiers shout your name in formation, you realize that the little girl who cried over stepping on an ant has grown into someone who will move heaven and earth to make sure no soldier gets left behind. That's not weakness. That's strength. You know, sharing my story with you tonight feels a lot like that moment when I first put on the uniform. Vulnerable, but real. Here's the thing. When I was carrying that guidon at graduation, when those 1,000 soldiers were chanting my name, I realized something important. None of it would have mattered if no one was there to witness it, to believe in it. Right now, you're my witness. You listened to my whole journey. You were there when Marcus called me weak. You were there when I wanted to quit. You were there when I found my strength. But here's what breaks my heart. Most people who listen to stories like mine, they walk away inspired for maybe a day, maybe a week, and then they forget. And they never hit that subscribe button. That little button? It's free. It costs you nothing. But for me, for stories like mine, it's everything. It's the difference between voices like mine reaching one person or reaching thousands who need to hear that they're stronger than they think. I'm not asking you to carry anyone's pack. I'm not asking you to lead a company or face down your biggest fears. I'm just asking you to hit subscribe. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of support create the biggest difference. And right now, that's all the backup I need. Will you be part of my formation?